Last autumn, Postscriptum died for good. It had been on live support for quite some time, and at first it was a competitor to Hell Let Loose. Yet, since being kind of a former shell of itself, Offworld Industry, the developers of Squad, swooped in to purchase the rights for the game, and it was back on. Postscriptum was brought into a new era, joined the established franchise as Squad 44. Players came back, and it seemed like it was all set for a mighty return. Yet all they did was really just kind of rebrand. And sure, it brought back a couple thousand players and sold a few copies along the way. Yet soon after, the game died down again because, well, it was just the same title that had already died in the past. So they needed to do something else. They needed to do something different, and they needed this time there'd be a hope for players to stick around. So out of nowhere, a huge update was dropped, and this was Reign of Steel. Can I just say, by the way, what a trailer this is. Hell Let Loose, please take notes with stuff like this. This is what this community wants. Not weird CGI stuff, but real looking battles. And it looks goddamn awesome. Okay, it doesn't give you a good indication of what's actually coming, but it's telling you that there's something interesting being done with the game, at least, which is something that Hell Let Loose hasn't done for quite a while. A lot of what came into Squad 44's new update was, granted, old work. Work that was meant to be released under the name of Postscriptum, but hadn't quite been finished and needed that little extra push along the line. There were 40 new vehicles and AT guns, including M3 carriers, Jacksons, the Calliope, which is one of the coolest looking things in the world, Comets, Valentines, if you're into your British tanks, Challengers, Tetrarchs, that sort of thing. A lot of armored cars as well, and of course on the German side we've got the Panzerwerfers, the Sturmhaubitze, and the Jagdpanzer as well, which are all awesome looking tanks. Now, it's just a plethora of new content on the vehicle sides, and I cannot fathom how long it must have taken them. Okay, granted, a lot of this was probably left over from the Postscriptum days, but bringing it all in one new update is absolutely huge. I've never seen 40 new vehicles being bought in with one update. I mean, the Weibelwerfer, I think that we can see that in the picture, looks goddamn awesome. Stugs as well, one of my favorite tanks, a very feared German tank, great for doing anti-tank stuff. And of course, a plethora of rocket artillery as well, which I haven't seen really in a game like this before. So I cannot wait to get use of that within, well, Postscriptum, or Squad 44 as it's now called. There's also some new game mechanics, allowing infantry the ability to ride on friendly tanks and also operate mounted MGs on some of the tanks as well. This is something that I've been waiting forever to be in a game like Hell Let Loose, and I don't know why it's not been done yet. I guess just because of the way that engine's made, well, Unreal Engine 4, it just isn't quite possible. For some reason, Squad 44 have managed to do it. I think that the guys over at Offworld Industries have been developing Squad for quite some time, and this is their type of game. They know what they're doing, and they are experienced in this type of development cycle. So going into something a little bit more complex isn't so much of a surprise, but I just wish so many of these things would be adding into Hell Let Loose, because Squad 44 has so much going for it if they can follow through with all of this. There is a new game mode at the front line one. There's a little preview that we got as well. It's worked out on Driel, Utah, and the Veghel maps. It's pretty much as you'd expect. Attack and defend with front lines that move back and forth in your very World War II-esque update. Now, there have been plenty more changelogs and game additions. Vehicles and AT guns have been reworked, bug patches, everything that you can expect. UI has been completely changed as well. A new cinematic round and victory loss screens, which are really, really cool. And a couple of extra stuff around the game modes and support. All in all, this is an absolutely huge update, and I think it's been really well received from the community. Most people are saying how incredible it is for 6 months to be delivering this much work all at once. And it really proves the difference between trying to build up a community and hurting it, as we've seen in games in the past. But the real important question to ask is, has this actually worked for the game? Well, yes and no. When I say worked, I'm strictly talking about have players come back, have their efforts to try and revive Postscriptum or Squad 44 actually work. The trailer release came with a good amount of hype and some really positive feedback, especially when this update came back. I think a lot of people hopped back on. If anyone is unaware, by the way, Hell Let Loose is a game that is kind of going in conjunction with this, a World War II simulator, and it's almost going in the opposite direction. Its player base has grown massively, and its fan base is strong as it's ever been, but the developers are haunting it. They're releasing buggy, unfinished updates with overpriced skin packs that are limited to only a couple maps, or even one map at the worst, and all this value that they built over the years is starting to waver with their fan base. Squad 44 seems to be doing the opposite. They have nothing to lose. They don't have a strong player base, so they can only really go up from here. So when this update was released, numbers started to flood back in, hitting over 1,300 concurrents in the first time in a long time, really. And all in all, a positive reception. Yet, the drop-off has already begun. And I mean, it's not a huge surprise. The game still has a lot of work to go, and people need to admit that this wasn't the stronger game in the first place, at least in my opinion. That's why it hasn't done so well. But it's to be expected though. A big update will spike the player base. But the important to note is looking at where that player base settles, so you can see the new standard for concurrent players within a game like Squad 44. It used to be around 300 concurrent players for the longest time. Then upon Offworld Industries buying it and having a rebrand, it went to around 450 to 500 concurrent players. My guess is, for this new update, and we still haven't seen its settle point yet, but our concurrent players will spike and then settle around the 600 to 700 player mark, which, sure, is nowhere near Hell Let Loose player numbers, but I don't think Offworld Industries, the developers for Squad 44, will care one bit. This is their first major update, and they've already seen an upwards trend. You see, Hell Let Loose was built up over years. It's been such a slow build to build that community, and there was no big influx or no big spike other than a few updates. It was a few hundred, then I remember when it was a couple thousand concurrent players for the longest time. Now it does sit at around 6,500 in its current state, and remember, it's kind of going through a downwards trend. So I think if we relate that to the way they're trying to build Squad 44, it is a huge positive. These types of simulation shooters are a marathon to try and build up. They're not a huge influx of players. They're not big mainstream titles that will get thousands and thousands of players all at once. They have to be built from the ground up to curry the favor of a new community, to let people trust them with new updates and content, because they're smaller teams with smaller budgets, so content is few and far between. Granted, it's been 6 months and we've had a huge content drop, but I'm assuming it's going to be a while before Squad 44's next one, so they need to have a community that trusts that it will come and they will stick around for that. So now they're on the right direction. There is an uphill and positive look at the player base. But what is that direction that they're going to next? Well, they did actually release a roadmap quite a while ago when they took over, and that was the 6-month roadmap. And that was kind of indicating everything that was coming within this one. A Chapter 1 overhaul with new map textures, updated weapon textures, and new environmental meshes. This for me was such a big thing. I think so many people talk positively about Postscriptum or Squad 44 because of its mechanics, and they are fantastic. Graphically, it is not a good looking game. Sound design wise, it does a pretty good job, but it does feel all more like a previous generation World War II shooter. It is very clunky in parts, and it looks that way. They need to bring it up to the modern day if they're expecting it to carry on in the future. And this is not just about graphics, this is about gameplay mechanics. Hell Let Loose, despite its many issues, does have a more arcadey approach, but is a lot smoother. Okay, ironically, they've ruined the movement in the last couple of updates, but it has been a lot more successful because of the much slicker and more quality build to it. And it does feel like a more quality game when you're playing it, less of an indie title that Squad 44 has been for quite some time. Yet, being taken over by Offworld Industries, I think they'll probably be doing a good job into trying to change that. We can see in their past roadmap that the new game mode, the new factions, and the new theaters are all here. We're looking at the Greek factions as well, which is an interesting addition, and I'm kind of glad that this is something they've been working on. But I don't know if it's entirely the right thing to be putting your focus on. Granted, we do know all this content was from Postscriptum and it's just layover content, so they are just releasing what was pretty much already done. That's fine. But the Greek front isn't exactly the most mainstream, and if they're trying to bring players back, I do think we need more British stuff. We need to be going into El Alamein, trying to do it a bit better than Hell Let Loose did it. Of course, they probably don't want to be conjuring exactly the same community as Hell Let Loose. There's probably needs to be a divide somewhere, so going off in different directions with their maps. I think whoever is the first to do a Pacific update is probably going to blow the competition out of the water, because, I mean, that is what most people have been waiting for. But there are its own issues, as I'll address in another video, with doing some sort of Pacific update within a game like Hell Let Loose or Squad 44. But have you played the new update? What do you think of it? I think there's a ton of new content and a ton of new stuff, and whilst it is still not the game that I would like it to be, which is a real competitor to Hell Let Loose, I think it's getting there. I still think it needs more time. And I know there are so many people that are so dedicated towards this community. Me, for one of them, it's just not a title that I think is refined enough to capture my attention for the longevity. And it seems like that is the majority of people's thoughts, judging by SteamDB and the concurrent player charts. It does drop down and settles down, but we're going up. And that's all we want to see, a positive trend of settled concurrent players that is better than it used to be. And I'm really, really glad there is some competition and something now to maybe put a firework up the arse of Hell Let Loose. And Offroad Industry seem like they're doing a great job. They've got the experience with Squad, and I think they can move on in the future, bringing this to Squad 44. Make sure you stick around the channel and subscribe for more news and more updates. There'll be plenty of it coming soon.